Hello. My name's Miss Robinson and I teach English at Parkwood Academy, and I'm going to be reading chapter 3 of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, titled The Letters from No One. If you're reading along at home, I am on page 33. So here goes. The escape of the Brazilian boa constrictor earned Harry his longest ever punishment. By the time he was allowed out of his cupboard again, the summer holidays had started. Dudley had already broken his new cine camera, crashed his remote control aeroplane, and the first time out on his racing bike, he'd knocked down old Mrs. Fig as she crossed Privet Drive on her crutches. Harry was glad school was over, but there was no escaping Dudley's gang, who visited the house every single day. Piers, Dennis, Malcolm and Gordon were all big and they were all stupid. But as Dudley was the biggest and stupidest of the lot, he was the leader. The rest of them were all quite happy to join in Dudley's favourite sport, Harry hunting. This was why Harry spent so much time as possible out of the house, wandering around and thinking about the end of the holidays where he could see a tiny ray of hope. When September came, Harry would be going off to secondary school, and for the first time in his life, he wouldn't be with Dudley. Dudley had a place at Uncle Vernon's old school, Smeltings. Piers Polkiss was going there too. Harry, on the other hand, was going to Stonewall High, the local comprehensive, and Dudley thought that was very funny. "They stuff people's heads down the toilets first day at Stonewall," he told Harry. "Wanna come upstairs and practice?" "No thanks," said Harry. "The poor toilet's never had anything as horrible as your head down it. It might be sick." And then he ran, before Dudley could work out what he'd even said. One day in July, Aunt Petunia took Dudley to London to buy his Smeltings uniform, leaving Harry at Mrs. Fig's. Mrs. Fig wasn't as bad as usual. It turned out she'd broken her leg tripping over one of her cats, and she didn't seem quite as fond of them as usual. She let Harry watch television and gave him a bit of chocolate cake that tasted like she'd had it several years. That evening, Dudley paraded around the living room for the family in his brand new uniform. Smeltings boys wore maroon tailcoats, orange knickerbockers, and flat straw hats called boaters. They also carried knobbly sticks, used for hitting each other when the teachers weren't looking. This was supposed to be good training for later life. He looked at Dudley in his new knickerbockers. Uncle Vernon said gruffly that it was the proudest moment of his life. Aunt Petunia burst into tears and said she couldn't believe that her ickle Dudleykins, he looked so handsome and grown up. Harry didn't trust himself to speak. He thought 2 of his ribs might already have cracked from trying not to laugh. There was a horrible smell in the kitchen the next morning when Harry went down for breakfast. It seemed to be coming from a large metal tub in the sink. He went to have a look. The tub was full of what looked like dirty rags swimming in grey water. "What's this?" he asked Aunt Petunia. Her lips tightened, as they always did if he dared to ask a question. "Your new school uniform," she said. Harry looked into the bowl again. "Oh," he said. "I didn't realise it had to be so wet." "Don't be stupid," snapped Aunt Petunia. "I'm dyeing some of Dudley's old things grey for you. It'll look just like everyone else when I've finished." Harry seriously doubted this. He thought it best not to argue. He sat down at the table and tried not to think about how he was going to look on the first day at Stonewall High. Like he was wearing old bits of elephant skin, probably. Dudley and Uncle Vernon came in, both with wrinkled noses because of the smell from Harry's new uniform. Uncle Vernon opened the newspaper as usual, and Dudley banged his smelting stick, which he carried everywhere, on the table. They heard the click of the letterbox and flop of letters on the doormat. "Get the post, Dudley," said Uncle Vernon from behind his paper. "Make Harry get it." "Get the post, Harry." "Make Dudley get it." "Poke him with your smelting stick, Dudley." Harry dodged the smelting stick and went to get the post. 3 things lay on the doormat. A postcard from Uncle Vernon's sister Marge, who was holidaying on the Isle of Wight. A brown envelope that looked like a bill. and a letter for Harry. Harry picked it up and stared at it, his heart twanging like a giant elastic band. No one ever, not in his whole life, had ever written to him. Who would? He had no friends, no other relatives. He didn't even belong to the library, so he couldn't get a rude note asking for books to be returned. Yet here it was, a letter, addressed so plainly that there could be no mistake. Mr. H. Potter, The Cupboard Under the Stairs, 4 Privet Drive, Surrey. The envelope was thick and heavy and made of a yellowish parchment, and the address was written in emerald green ink. There was no stamp. Turning the envelope over, his hand trembled. Harry saw a purple wax seal bearing a coat of arms. A lion, an eagle, a badger and a snake surrounding a large letter H. "Hurry up, boy," shouted Uncle Vernon from the kitchen. "What are you doing, checking for letter bombs?" He chuckled at his own joke. Harry went back to the kitchen, still staring at his letter. He handed Uncle Vernon the bill and the postcard, sat down, slowly began to open the yellow envelope. Uncle Vernon ripped open the bill, snorted in disgust and flipped over the postcard. "Marge is ill," he informed Aunt Petunia. "Ate a funny whelk." "Dad!" said Dudley suddenly. "Dad, Harry's got something." Harry was at the point of unfolding his letter, which was written in the same small, heavy parchment as the envelope, when it was jerked suddenly from his hand by Uncle Vernon. "That's mine!" said Harry, trying to snatch it back. "Who'd be writing to you?" sneered Uncle Vernon, shaking the letter open with one hand and glancing at it. His face went from red to green, faster than a set of traffic lights. And it didn't stop there. Within seconds, it was greyish-white of old porridge. "Petunia," he gasped. Dudley tried to grab the letter to read it, but Uncle Vernon held it high out of his reach. Aunt Petunia took it curiously and read the first line. For a moment, it looked like she might faint. She clutched her throat and made a choking noise. "Vernon! Oh my goodness, Vernon!" They stared at each other, seeming to have forgotten that Harry and Dudley were still in the room. Dudley wasn't used to being ignored. He gave his father a sharp tap on the head with his smelting stick. "I want to read that letter," he said loudly. "I want to read it," said Harry furiously. "It's mine." "Get out, both of you," croaked Uncle Vernon, stuffing the letter back in its envelope. Harry didn't move. "I want my letter," he shouted. "Let me see it," demanded Dudley. "Out!" roared Uncle Vernon, and he took both Harry and Dudley by the scruffs of their necks and threw them into the hall, slamming the door on his way. Harry and Dudley promptly had a furious but silent fight over who would listen at the keyhole. Dudley won, so Harry, with his glasses dangling from his ear, lay flat on his stomach to listen at the crack between the door and the floor. "Vernon," Aunt Petunia was saying in a quivering voice, "look at the address. How could they possibly know where he sleeps? You don't think they're watching the house?" "Watching, spying, might be following us," he muttered Uncle Vernon wildly. "What should we do, Vernon? Should we write back? Tell them we don't want..." Harry could see Uncle Vernon's shiny black shoes pacing up and down the kitchen. "No," he said finally. "No, we'll ignore it. If they don't want to get an answer, they won't. Yes, that's better. We won't do anything. But I'm not having him in my house, Petunia. Didn't we swear when we took him that we'd stamp out that dangerous nonsense?" That evening, when he got home from work, Uncle Vernon did something that he'd never done before. He visited Harry in his cupboard. "Where's my letter?" said Harry the moment Uncle Vernon had squeezed through the door. "Who's writing to me?" "No one. It was addressed to you by mistake," said Uncle Vernon. "I've burned it."